resting state, it wants to keep everything about your resting state as it is. And I'm not just talking about a certain heartbeat at a resting state, a certain amount of respiration at a resting state. Not just that, I mean mindful. What does a normal resting state day look like for you? Are you usually pessimistic? Is that your resting state? It's like, yeah, I don't know, man, nothing's gonna work out and everything's a scam and everybody's trying to do whatever. Or are you an optimist? Is that your resting emotional state? Like, hey, stuff is gonna work out, things happen for a reason, I got another chance or whatever. By the way, you want to be optimistic, I think, as much as possible if you want to have a happy life. You need to be pessimistic sometimes. Okay, you watch that video I did on optimism, because I talk about optimism and pessimism in that thing. But resting state on a normal day could just be like 8 hours of games a day. That's my normal routine. I could just put routine here. Let me put routine up here. You want to do this. You're like, okay, my resting state is, hey, let me keep checking throughout the day. How many steps am I at? Did I get to 20 yet? Okay, welcome back everyone to another video. Today's topic is things are never as bad as you think. So let's just go ahead and jump right into this one. Things are never as bad as you think. Now that's a pretty bold statement, all right? Why are things never as bad as you think? Well, how many times has a bad thing happened to you? Let's go back way back in time. Let's turn the clocks back to when you were just a couple of years old, all right? And you were starting to learn to walk, and you were failing at that because most people don't just get up out of being a year or two older or whatever it is that it was for you and just walk perfectly and just run around. Okay, that would be kind of creepy if a baby were to do that. They have to go through the steps. By the way, I have a really important video on here about not skipping steps, but this isn't necessarily all about that. We'll probably touch on that a little bit, but things aren't as bad as you think. Why? Well, when you were failing at walking, you probably cried a couple of times. You probably fell down and it was scary and you might have felt hurt a little bit, but then what happened? Well, you got up and you tried again, and if not that day, the next day, and then the next day, and eventually stuff worked out. I don't know, when you first started learning how to do what? Like ride a bike, the same thing was probably true. When you first, imagine if you got a new video game, right? Here, let me draw it up here. This is you. Let me draw you over here like I always do. Here's you, all right? And here is, let's say, here's a TV, and here's a game console right here. I don't know what it is. It might be just a computer or something. So here's your TV, here's your game console or whatever, and you got a little controller. I'll do my best to draw a controller here. I don't know why it has that. There we go. And it's got some buttons on it, right? And a little analog stick. That's you. All right. Let's say what happened. On your game here is plugged into the TV, right? All right. So on your game, you died, right? Damn. Died. That's what it says on there. Man, these thick markers, they have a tip right here. I need some of my skinny ones. So when I write words, sometimes it bleeds them together too much. They're like, damn, I died on the game. So most people didn't just throw down the controller and never touch a video game again, ever. Right? Because that would be, man, they're thinking this is worse than it seems. Like, I died on the game. Okay, that's it. Game over. That means I can also never play another game. Let's say you're playing Call of Duty. Well, you're like, well, I just lost at this. I can't play Call of Duty. I can't play Halo. I can't play, like, I don't know, Super Mario. I can't play Solitaire, like on my phone or something. I can't play anything because I died at this one game. That would be a person thinking things that are, they're worse than they are. Right? You would never see that. But the reason I come up with a silly example, make it easier for you to remember, we do this a lot in our own lives. Like when things go wrong, and they might be big things, we'll get to that. When things go wrong, we throw down the controllers like, we can never do this. We can never, not only can we not play that game, you can't play any game. You better not even start sitting at a poker table one day because this just taught you that you can't do it, right? And that's your brain. Doesn't that seem extreme? Well, of course it does. But every time that you hold on to just the bad things about what's happening and you're like, man, this is just the worst thing and it just feels like that. I know, I get it. It feels like that. But when you hold on to that and you allow that to control your reactions and your actions from there on, What that's basically the same thing as doing what this dude just did. That's you fit. When I say things are never as bad as you think, well, you're gonna think they're kind of bad in the in the time that they're happening. Let's say you're in college or something and you failed a pretty important test. That sucks. But is it as bad as you think? Here's the deal. Maybe worst case scenario, you gotta retake the class again. Okay, go retake the class again. You have 50% of the work already done. You're not gonna forget all of it. See, there you go. It's not as bad as you think. You're not gonna just not ever get anywhere. Maybe the worst thing happened to you. Maybe you failed this test and you lost all of the funding that you had for going to school and you can't get a scholarship now or something. Hopefully you don't get to that point. But even if that happened, what else is there? Is it as bad as you think? No. You can get up and try again. You can find more funding. Trust me. You can pull your GPA up. You can take some time and study really hard, hit the books or whatever it is, and get yourself back into that situation. Because your brain, it does this. It's like, oh, I failed this test. Then what does that mean? Here, let me put a test over here. You died right there on the video game. This is a test. Right here. Let's say test. Let's say you made a 19% on that thing. You bombed the shit out of that test. That's pretty bad, okay? And your brain is thinking, it hits you with a whole bunch of what ifs right now. Well, maybe I'll fail the whole class. Maybe I'll have to take the class again and I'll lose funding for the school. Maybe I'll get kicked out of the school. Maybe I'll never get a good job ever in my life. You see how it tumbles from there? Maybe I'm a failure at everything that I do and stuff like that. The tumbling is you thinking things are really, really bad. Things are never as bad as you think because your brain is kind of programmed to think in those terms and tumble in the bad directions, the little bad thinking paths, just so it can figure out every little bad thing that can happen to you to protect you from dying. These things right here are not going to have you die. You might die on the game. You might get shot in Call of Duty or something. I don't know what you're playing. Maybe in Skyrim. Maybe you step off of a mountain cliff and you just plummet to your death or something. That's why it's a game. Alright? But your brain, when something, even a 19 on a test or something, really, really freaks you out, part of the reason is because it starts going down these paths of hey, I didn't just fail this test. Alright? I am now going to get kicked out of the school, and I'm going to have to work for minimum wage my whole life, and I have all these student loans that I still have to pay back, or whatever the case is. That starts happening in here. When, hey, if it's just one test, let's say you're in, college biology or something like that, and this is your first test. It's not that big of a deal. You'll probably still be able to pass the class if you pay attention from now on. I don't know how you would make a 19 on a test. You either were not paying attention, or maybe you missed a lot of instruction for some reason. Maybe you were out sick or something, you just man, I just missed a lot of instruction, but then you're this test is kicking my ass and stuff, and I'm going to get kicked out of school. Well, here's the deal. You forgot that, maybe you were out because you were sick, or you got injured, or something happened. Maybe you had to take care of someone for a week or 2 or 3 or something, like a parent or a loved one, and you just couldn't get to school and do any of that stuff. You got to remember those things. It's not as bad as you think. That is a one-off kind of thing. All right? The next time that you start doing the tests, right, it's not going to be like that, or we would hope not, but your brain kind of makes it feel like that because it has this pain aversion, like mechanics to it. It's hey, when things happen that we don't like, that make us feel bad or give us any sort of pain, your brain literally, it brands those memories as, okay, this is important. When you see anything like that again, wake up, right, and don't be a part of it. So then every time you see a test from now on, you're going to kind of freak out just a little bit. That's you thinking that it's worse than it is. It's not. See what I mean? That's like I said, what if someone picked up a game? They died one time and their brain was dang, I'm sad. I thought I was doing good in the game. All of my friends are around me or something. They're doing good at it. Now I look like a moron. I'm it's not really that simple. But here again, your brain kind of runs away with you on those things. And it's easy to get in those patterns. It sounds silly, but it's really not. Because why? Well, when you take things, think about something that you're upset about right now, or that you were in the past year or 2 or something. that you ended up getting out of, that things turned out better than you expected, that you got out of it. Because even if your brain doesn't outright say this, a lot of times, what does it do? When it thinks things are really bad and stuff, it makes you think that they are worse than they are. You could be like, this thing happened to me, and it's bad. Yes, that's true. But the fact is, like, your brain also recalls all the other things that ever happened to you. It also projects into the future. What if these things happen? It doesn't say those things, but it makes the experience of something bad into a catastrophe. That's why I say things are never as bad as you think. Right? And when it does that, like I said, if you need proof of that, think back to something that was a big deal to you, that you failed at, or you feel like you failed at, or maybe you got embarrassed somewhere, or maybe, I don't know, you had a breakup with somebody, or with a friend, you had a falling out, or you made a 19 on a test, or whatever it was that you were really in the moment. You were, like, hopped up on pessimism. You were not feeling good, right? All of those things. That right there, if you look back on it now, you're like, you know something? It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I kind of ran away with it. I freaked out when I shouldn't have. I panicked, right? We don't want to do that as much as possible. But you'll think that. You'll think, I mentally panicked about it. I shouldn't have done that. And every one of us can think of times, probably even within just the past year, some of us the past month, to where like, oh man, this thing is going to happen, right? And we're just waiting and waiting on it, and then something happens that either averts that thing, or it's not as bad as you think that it is. You're like, and when you get there, the people, they're like, this isn't as bad as you think. I don't know why you were so freaked out. Maybe you take a test. This happens even when something bad doesn't happen. Think about this. Maybe one day you made a 19 on a test back in grade school or something. You go into college, and now every time you're about to take a test, you got a lot of anxiety. Like, man, I hope I pass. I hope I can do good. I hope I did enough studying. If I can just make just enough, just to pass. It doesn't even need to be an A or something. Ever had any of those thoughts? Well, that's because it's recalling this. And then what happens? You take the test, you pass just fine. You might even knock it out of the park. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever, took a test and you're like, dude, I don't know about this one or something like that, and you did really good. Actually, not only did you pass, but you weren't even close to failing. It doesn't have to be a test. It can be at anything in your life. It could be a job interview. It could be whatever. But in the moment, things feel worse than they are. If you just broke things down to exactly what's happening right now, no past, no future, none of that, just right now, but you're not really able to do that because your brain doesn't like thinking just in those terms. It calls up all of these other things. Like I said, it pulls from the past, projects into the future. Now, what can you do? Well, just like anything, your brain, it can be trained. So there are, you know what a habit is, right? A habit is basically training your brain to run a script. It's basically to perform this behavior in this situation without me having to think about it. That's what a habit is. You can have good habits, you can have bad habits. We all know what the bad habits are, and we know what the good ones are. You can probably, spending all of your money immediately as soon as you get your paycheck on depreciating assets is a bad habit. A good habit would be something like, hey, I take a walk 30 minutes every single day for my health. Maybe an hour for some of y'all too, I don't know. If you went from never taking a walk and you even just did a 10-minute walk every day, that's a good habit to build relative to what you had in place before, and that's not taking a walk. You see what I mean? And your brain, with this freaking out about things are worse than they appear, they're not. Things are never as bad as you think because your brain makes it seem worse to try to protect you, but it's like an evolutionary mismatch, is I think what they call that. So you train it. You train it with optimism, with or you can just sit back, just logically be like, okay, even if I failed this test, is that going to stop me from going to school? In most cases, it's not. If this one test that you're taking is going to get you kicked completely out of school, you had more problems going on leading up to that than just that moment. For most of us, that's not the case, and for most things in your life, it isn't. So you can train your brain to do what? To see things with a little bit more optimism. It takes a little effort, depending on who you talk to. New habits take even small ones take at least a month. A lot of science says at least 2 months, though, actually is a better indicator. Some of them say 3, and for some deep ingrained habits, it's going to take you 6 months to a year to 2 years to really shake it off, right? But most people would agree that it takes at least 2 months getting started, maybe even 90 days, right? With some little things, you might have enough, might have enough mental fortitude to just be like, okay, you know what, I'm quitting this thing cold turkey, not doing that anymore, I need to focus on some other, whatever it is, that's going to help you more. Some people in certain times, they can do that, and in just one day, they can change. For most of us, that is not going to be the case. With most things, and especially some ingrained habits that you've had for a while, it's going to take you at least 2 months, probably closer to 3 or maybe 6 months to a year, to really train your brain that, no, whatever was going on, that isn't us. This is the new us. Resting state. That's what you want to be. Your resting state. Here, let's put it here, because I'm going to refer to this a little bit. You want this right here, your resting state, to be one that lifts you up. Your resting state needs to be like, every time I wake up, I need to, I don't know, get my 10,000 steps in, if that's something that you consider important. And you need to be, that's your resting state. Your resting state is thinking like, if I haven't hit my 10,000 steps, I need to keep doing it. Now, I realize that different science have different opinions on this. I've heard that if you're a man, you need to be doing closer to 15 to 20,000 steps. Because back in our hunter-gatherer days, men walked a little bit more than women because they had to hunt. They had to go after things, right? Like, make these little hunting parties, and they would take it and they would walk far, tracking prey and also just checking the place out. You were in nature, you needed to just go out there like as scouts and stuff and just kind of cover ground, but you were following animals that you were hunting. Like, women, generally speaking, didn't do as much as the hunting. Of course, there were always exceptions, but generally speaking, women did more of the caretaking. Right? They took care of the elderly. They took care of babies. They gathered. It was easier to put a baby like in a little basket on your back, right, and gather food or something, or have the little kids walking around with you, and you're teaching them about things. And the little kids that aren't old enough to go out with the men and understand hunting, if they were boys, right? So even women still 10,000 was like the minimum. A woman would walk maybe 12,000 to 15,000 steps too. But if you're a man, you walked more. Now, why am I going into this? Well, it doesn't matter. Even 10,000 is good. Most people probably don't get that even. Now, so if you got 10,000 and you're not already doing 10,000, start there. Great. You don't want to be like, okay, every day I'm going to walk 20,000 steps, but right now, you know how many steps I do a day? 2,000, maybe 3. And you go straight from that to 20,000, that might be too hard for your brain to take in. Then your brain is going to do this. It's going to be like, dude, this is bad. 20,000 steps. Do you have any idea how many steps that is? Or we're going to throw everything in your face to make you not want to do that. Because taking more steps is pain. And what did we establish? We don't want any more pain. We're pain averse. Pain aversion. I believe there's a cognitive bias that's called the pain aversion bias or something like that. Those things are called different things by different people in different scenarios and stuff, but I think pain aversion bias or something like that, they're like, hey, something that sucks, we don't want to be a part of that as much. And going from 3,000 steps a day to 20,000, that's too much, man. Your brain can't handle that. It will throw as many things at you. Be like, hey man, there's the comfy couch. Hey man, take the car. Hey man, take the elevator instead of the stairs. Hey man, sit here on your PlayStation or whatever you got here and keep dying on the game. That's better than you having to go and walk another 17,000 steps a day. So you probably don't want to do that. and you know, they say step by step you get ahead. Okay, you do a little bit better every day. When a little baby starts walking, they're not walking 20,000 steps a day. They're doing what, 3 steps a day or something? That's damn good for a baby that never walked before. And the next day they'll do 5. The next day they'll do 10. You see where this is going? Okay, so you want to do that. If you're only walking 2,000 or 3,000 steps a day because you have an office job, you drive everywhere, and you might walk around your house, like into your living room or your bedroom just a little bit, go from 3,000 to, 8,000. Just go take a walk at the park and try to do that. Go from 3,000 to 6. That's even good. Doubling the amount, that's still really good. It won't be that hard to get that. You don't want, what you don't want to do, if here's a graph right here of you, and here's all the steps, right? Let's say this is, let's start it at 0. So that's 0, and here's 5K, right? 10K, and here's 15K, and here's where we want to get to at some point, 20K. Not everybody needs to be at 20K, okay? Most people, I think, would be pretty healthy if they just got to 10, because most people don't get anywhere near 10. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be like, okay, I'm here on the graph, right? And here, this is 0 time too. This side is time here. Let's put time. Okay, and then this is steps. Yeah. When I say K, I don't mean kilometers. Could you imagine walking 20 kilometers every day? All right, but even so, like 20 kilometers is there were plenty of civilizations to where that was very normal, to where that they would walk. What is 20 kilometers? It's not 20 miles. It's like what, 14 miles? Between 10 and 14 or something. I'm sorry, I don't know the conversion that well. I know it's not quite half. I think it's around 12,000 miles, right? But if you walk to, or 12 miles, 20 kilometers. Anyways, that's not important. It's not kilometers, all right? It's just steps. So steps, here's the time. What's the end of the day? 24 hours, right? So each one of these is an hour. Now let's say, oh, okay, what we're gonna do during our day, and you start at 0, ideally you would do this. And at the end of the day, you would hit 20, but you don't want to do that your first time, right? What you want to do your first time is something like, right here. Or rather, it'd look like this, actually, because at the end of the day, you would hit 5,000. So let me erase that one. Okay. So starting at 0 hours, at 24 hours, we hit 5,000 steps. For some of you, that would be really good. There are people that you probably even know that take less than 1,000 steps a day. That is not healthy. Your body is not designed to be that sedentary. Okay, even 5,000 isn't great, but if you're doing less than that right now, start with that. Step by step, you get ahead. This whole thing is about training your brain not to do this. This is just an example of, hey, if you go straight from, okay, I take 2,000 or 3,000 steps a day and go straight to 20, your brain will freak out and it will stop you from doing it. It's like, nope, you're crazy. You're trying to kill us. And it will find every little excuse to stop you from doing it. Right? Does that make sense? Have you ever tried a new habit? That's why that's why if you try to quit smoking, it's so hard. Because, like, the brain doesn't like cold turkey situations. It's not this. You're like, resting state is smoking a pack a day. We need all of those cigarettes in one day. But if you go from a whole pack to 75% of the pack, or half a pack, and then to a quarter of a pack, and you do that over, a couple of weeks or a couple of months or stuff, your brain won't be able to tell as much, so it won't freak out. You gotta be careful about freaking your brain out. Right? There's a, oh man, do I have it here? I moved a lot of my books around, so I don't have them all here. I think, some of them are over there. And so I need to move them back over here so people can see them all. I was using this table space. So there is a really, man, I forgot who it was. I saw the book. It might have been Daniel Goleman. Was it him who did it? Oh man, I don't even want to say the name because I might get it wrong. But they came up with the idea of like the elephant in the rider. That's a big one. It might not have been. I know he does talk about it in his books. So it might have been through Daniel Goleman that I was exposed to that idea. Those lots of people who study psychology will come up with that. Not come up with that idea. They'll reference that idea because whoever did come up with it, well, they respect them a lot and they build off of that idea, right? Like I said, step by step, you get ahead. Other scientists came up with something and you build off of those. That's this. You wouldn't want to go from, okay, we're out here using, spears and pitchforks to hand, or bow and arrows to hunt animals, and then you go directly from that to like, I don't know, like one of those like a minigun or something, and you're just out there just. That would be too weird to people. They would be like, we're the tribe. If you introduce them directly to weapons that could take down herds of animals or something like that, that would be too weird. They wouldn't get near it because it'd be like the 20,000 steps. Or if you went, like I said this in another video, if you were able to travel to the past and show people in like the 1500s or something what like an iPad is, and like, hey, check it out, you can scroll, you can take pictures with it, it makes sound, there's a video on it, people would think you were crazy because it's too much. Their brain couldn't handle it. It's too much, it's too weird, it's too much of a change. They'd probably kill you, to be honest, if they saw you do some roll up in there with an iPad. They'd be like, this is witchcraft, you need to die, right? But your brain, speaking of dying, your brain thinks that it's dying if you go from 0 to 20,000. It's like, this is extremely hard work. You are not used to this. We feel like we're dying. All right? So that's why you don't go from there to there. Anyways, elephant in the rider, that's what I was getting to. So the elephant is that part of your brain you don't want to freak out. You freak the elephant out. The rider, who is sitting on top of the elephant, like kind of like it's a horse, can't control it because it's an elephant. It can control it most of the time. The rider being your logical mind, being like, okay, things are never as bad as we think, right? Yeah, that's something the rider would think. But the elephant thinks things are always as bad as it thinks. And it thinks this right here, too many steps, going up too many steps at once, or cutting out your entire pack of cigarettes a day, that freaks the elephant out. And now you can't control it, and now it's starting to, that's why it's so hard to make a new habit like that. Like people want to, they want to quit smoking or quit drinking or something, and there's withdrawal. Even with things that don't have withdrawal, you could be like, I don't know, you could play too many video games. And if you try to go from playing, 8 hours a day to not touching that thing for like a month or something, obviously it's possible, and people do it. That you are much more likely, I'm say there's a probably 99% failure rate of someone going from 8 hours a day to 0, unless they were put in a situation to where it was impossible. Like, dropped off on a desert island, or they had to move somewhere and fend for themselves or something. We're not talking about those situations. We're just talking about, hey, I play too many video games. I play 8 hours a day or something. That's too many. I need to cut it down. Well, cut it down to 6 hours and then to 4. Don't go straight from 8 to 0, because what's going to happen is that elephant in your mind will get freaked out and it will make you fail. And when you fail, you have that pain aversion. What does the pain aversion do? Pain aversion is like, okay, we never want to try that again. And so you're going to just keep playing for 8 hours. You'll never be able to get out of it, right? They say, one of my favorite quotes is, and I'm paraphrasing a little, but the shackles of habits are too weak for you to feel them until they become too strong for you to break them. Right? Habits, that's how they grow, especially bad ones. They just a little bit at a time. You didn't come out of the womb playing 8 hours of PlayStation, right? It happened kind of gradually. You also didn't come out of the womb like being able to sprint a quarter mile or something. Wouldn't that be freaky if somebody came out of the womb able to sprint a quarter mile, or even able to just take 3,000 steps a day? That would be freaky. You can't do that. All right? What happened in each case? Well, you learned to play games 8 hours a day. You learned to take up to 3,000 steps a day, then 5, then 10, or whatever it is you got to, because you started at 0. You couldn't take one step. Then guess what? Your mommy and daddy, they held you up a little and walked with you or whatever, and you could take 1 step, then 2 steps, then 3 steps a whole day, right? And step by step you got ahead. And you never even realized what was happening. Even with this. Right? Even with, one day I tried a cigarette, and then I tried 2, and now I'm on a pack a day. Some people are on 2 packs a day or something. Right? And not just with that, it could be drinking. It could be spending too much money. It eventually, as it happens, and as you do it, the habit becomes, it becomes ingrained, because the shackles of habits, they're too weak for you to feel them until they become too strong for you to break them. You don't see that it's happening. This is good, though, because it works the other way. Your brain won't see if you do just a little bit at a time, so it won't freak out. Because resting state, it wants to keep everything about your resting state as it is. And I'm not just talking about a certain heartbeat at a resting state, a certain amount of respiration at a resting state. Not just that, I mean mindful. What does a normal resting state day look like for you? Are you usually pessimistic? Is that your resting state? It's like, yeah, I don't know, man, nothing's going to work out and everything's a scam and everybody's trying to do whatever. Or are you an optimist? Is that your resting emotional state? Like, hey, stuff is going to work out. Things happen for a reason. I got another chance or whatever. By the way, you want to be optimistic, I think, as much as possible if you want to have a happy life. You need to be pessimistic sometimes. Okay, you watch that video I did on optimism, because I talk about optimism and pessimism in that thing. But resting state, on a normal day, it could just be like 8 hours of games a day. That's my normal routine. I could just put routine here. Let me put routine up here also. Okay, but I also like to call it resting state, because resting state implies that when your body is not freaking out about something new, and it doesn't have to be freaking out, when it is not examining something new, and you're like, whew, not too much is going on. What do you want to do? Video games. What do you want to do? Let me smoke some cigarettes. What do you want to do? You want to do this. You're like, okay, my resting state is, hey, let me keep checking throughout the day. How many steps am I at? Did I get to 20 yet? Remember, you're not going straight to 20. Just at 5. Just try to get to 5 in one day. If you're below 5, just get to 5. Because once you get there, you'll gain courage. You'll train that elephant like, hey, it's okay. It's okay. We're just going to walk just a little bit more. It's not that much. Because when your elephant sees that, the elephant in your brain sees that, it starts, imagine a stampeding elephant that's just bucking and like smashing everything in its path. That is pretty damn scary, okay? And that is the kind of thing that it will do inside of here for you if you do this, and it will start freaking out, and then you freak out, right? Then this right here, the whole subject of this sounds like this is a talk on resting state and habits and stuff, and it is, but I'm coming up with those topics and weaving them in here because things are never as bad as you think. You have to train yourself to get there. You have to turn it into a habit and then turn that habit instinctual. So that, what is your habit in the day? Like, well, several times throughout the day, you ever check your phone? They say the average person checks their phone a couple hundred times a day. Now, that might be bad or good depending on what you're doing. If you're checking your phone for this right here, let's see how many steps I'm on. That's not a bad habit. I don't think it is. If that became your resting state, it's like, okay, every time I have a little bit of free time, hey, how many steps am I on today? And keep looking at that. That's a good habit to develop. What about like, what about books? Be like, okay, what book am I reading this week? Did I get through another few pages or a chapter or something today or the next day? Where am I at on that? And you track that and you turn it into a habit. Some of the habits are like, oh, I play too many games, or oh, I watch too much Netflix, or oh, I scroll too much TikTok or something. And because all of that is essentially is video games. It's essentially the same thing. Because like it's all taking you to doing this instead of some things that you should do. There's nothing wrong with some of that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, do you want to be someone who scrolls TikTok 8 hours a day? I doubt that's what you want to do. Because you're just going to be in control of the people. You're making somebody else rich and they're making you miserable. I have another video on how technology, how it makes kind of people miserable. Or it was about AI. That the real danger of AI isn't all the other things that people come up with. It's that, oh, you'll be sadder. If you use the convenience AI will bring you to scroll through more TikTok, to like not be around people more, to sit on your games more. Now I don't have to do it just 8 hours, now I can do it 10 hours. That's what the video was about. You don't want to get into that. People need to interact with other people. They need to get steps. They need to be outside a little bit and feel the sun and the wind. These are like, those things are resting state for a human on a day-to-day basis. You know what isn't resting state? That's not resting state. Scrolling through social media for 8 hours. You can do it sometimes, that's fine, but like you know what I'm talking about. You know the distinction if it's a bad habit or not. You know the stuff that you need to cut out. Those things, by the way, you know why they make you depressed? It's because there is an elephant in your mind that's thinking, resting state for us was walking a lot, looking for food and resources and talking to the tribe and teaching children and listening to the elderly and those connections. And so with the modern things that's going on, a lot of times they'll make you sadder over time if you dedicate too much time to them. Because of that, by the way, that kind of goes into this just a little bit of a tangent. But right, things are never as bad as you think. Think about it this way, right? Like, you probably, if you're watching this, were not, I don't know, born in a really poor part of Africa and had HIV before you even knew what a disease was, right? If that's not you, things aren't as bad as, as they probably could be. Think about those things. There's some bad stuff that you were lucky and you missed. Lots of people are born into those situations. You could have been born, I don't know, 500 years ago to where, like, if you didn't swear 100% fealty to your king, you were killed. Imagine that being today. Now you can disagree. You can vote. That wasn't a thing back then. Whoever was the king was the king. You can vote. You can agree with this side and talk shit about that side. You could even send, hate mail to people who are in authority positions, who are like politicians and stuff. They get it all the time. I don't think you should do those, but if you did those, are people going to come out to your house and kill you? Probably not. Guess what happened back if you were born 500 years ago and you didn't disagree with something? Here was the answer to that. You didn't disagree with stuff. Because if your king or or the holy men of the time or any of that stuff, if you were not in complete agreement, you died. That was it for you. Because that's how the world used to be. They could just come up in there and just take everything from you just because they felt like it. Maybe they didn't like who you were. Maybe you were married or something. Let's say you had a wife, and some bigwig came along and they liked your wife more. In a lot of ways, they could just take them. There's nothing you could do unless you wanted to die, right? There's been a lot of bad stuff. It's never as bad as you think, okay? Remember those things whenever you're thinking. And then, okay, so back on the topic of this right here, you have to train your brain. You have to train your mind to want to go down those paths of thinking that things aren't as bad as you think they are, because your brain likes to pull out, sorry, my nose is itching a little here, your brain likes to pull out all these other things. When you get that 19 on a test or whatever it is, you could get a 69 and you don't pass by 1 point or something like that. Same thing could happen. Alright, and it makes it feel worse than it is, because it calls up all the other stuff that could go wrong or has gone wrong or any of that. You have to train your mind little by little, like this, like we talked about, to be like, okay, this isn't that big of a deal. What's the silver lining? What's the opportunity? Let's get a little bit meditative here and think about, okay, what am I really learning from this situation? Not like, oh, I'm sad, right? It has to be trained. And this is a good explanation of training it, because you have to develop the good habit of looking at things, and because if you're the kind of person that when something bad happens, that it kind of crushes you. Not all of you are like that. And for those of you who already have that training and stuff, you agree with this completely. I'm sure of it. You're like, yeah, you got to try. This is something worth having. So what does that mean? It takes work. You got to work on seeing things in a more positive light. All right, so remember, don't bite off too much. Speaking of elephants, how do you eat one? One bite at a time. If you try to swallow a whole damn elephant at once, you'd have to eat that thing over like a month, right? Because there's just so much food. If you were into eating elephants, I don't think many people are. But if you try to eat it all at once, you would choke and you would die. It would kill you. That would literally kill you. Doing this, going from like 2,000 or 3,000 steps to 20K, that's too much. The elephant in your mind will freak out. So same thing with optimism. You don't want to get a 19 on something and just have this never-ending smile on your face walking around everywhere and just, oh my god, everything is bliss and stuff, because you'll crash in just a couple of hours and you'll be right back to that, whatever your resting state emotions are. And then what happens? Then your brain is like, hey, remember when you tried that? Remember when you tried that optimism crap? When you got that 19% and it didn't work? Don't try that again, okay? Because we don't like that. We don't like failing at stuff. You don't want that to happen, right? You want to be like, okay, the first time I make a 19, you're like, okay, I'm really upset about this. What can I do? Okay, this is gonna I'm gonna be upset about this for a week. I know it, but what I can do is, like, at least I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm gonna review the material just a little bit more. I'm gonna look at it a little more. I'm gonna talk to my friends who did okay in the test or whatever it is. I'm going to look back on the other tests that I did and see how was it that I got a better grade then than I did now. Still upset. You're not going from being crushed at this 19% to being in total bliss, because that's a 3,000K or 3K to 20K steps. You can't do that because your brain will stop you. It'll stop you. You gotta train it up. A little bit of optimism. By the way, the best way to do that is get around a bunch of people who are already good at that. Because then it's not them taking the initiative. You're not having to carry that whole thing, but you still get a little bit of the benefit of just the energy of being around them when something sucks for them. See how they react. What kind of things do they say? What kind of body language do they have? What kind of attitude do they put on? Because a lot of them, it might not be the best attitude, but they'll be like, well, damn. Instead of like going home and crying into your pillow or freaking out that you're going to get kicked out of school for all time or something. It's never going to happen, or that wouldn't happen, not off of one thing like that, right? I'm sure there's been plenty of people that were kicked out of school because of their grades, but made a comeback, right? It's never as bad as you think. So anyway, we're going to wrap this one up right there. Please do like and subscribe if this has brought you any value, because those do really help me out. And yeah, man, we will see you on the next one.